And we're back with more Final Fantasy VII. Strife and Lee are gonna climb a mountain. We're gonna climb a mountain! Nothing bad will happen up here. It's not like you're big
may or
chickens.
may not have been, Lee may or may not have been jamming to music during the break.
Yeah. I just made that up. Yay! Birdies get poisoned.
But they're giving you thunder kisses.
I don't want Thunder Kisses unless it's from 1965 and Rob Zombie. I forget what that album is called.
Hershey's Kisses.
I actually have those. My mom gave me those in Lifesavers. I had some during my break. This guy's had better days. Hey, you're actually talking to me. What is it? I just passed a guy in a black cape back there. I tried to tell him it was dangerous up ahead, but he ignored me. Well, probably because he can put a snake through a tree.
You mean a tree through a snake?
Ah, yes.
There was a black-caped guy here, too?
That's not foreboding. Oh, I hate these fucking guys. Lasers. As much as I'd like to keep using Seal Evil, I keep having to heal myself. Oh well. Ow! That hurt. Oh yeah, I got the Force Stealer. I better equip that. I forgot I had that big, giant, machete-looking thing still. Bonk. Stupid bird. Speaking of birds I hate, the guys from Wutai that used lightning. They spam lightning like nothing. I'm like, eh! Anyway, Force Stealer. Oh. Ah. Alright, let's get rid of... No, I want steel. Alright. So now you're going to start seeing double weapons. So I'll get mugged super quick. Or quicker, at least. Oh. Oh, these things. Giant turtle-looking guys. Oh boy. Couldn't steal anything.
Don't they have something you can steal?
I would think they're big enough.
I think it's a weapon for red.
Well, if I can find it. Ow! Meanie. Ah, diamond pin. There we go.
Hey! Ooh.
Ow. That kind of hurt.
Let's do it then. It's all the duplicate.
Alright. This is one of those times when I'm playing Tales of Arise, I have to think of something I want to talk about because I'm not doing storyline stuff. It's weird. I don't know what to talk about! I don't have anything to talk about right now. I feel inadequate. they would. There was a guy, one of the Let's Players who I modeled myself after, named Nakatulili, would always call these dungeon rants.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know what to talk about, though. And what the fuck are you?
Ish. Like the Festidicalums.
Float. Oh, I know what we could talk about. Final Fantasy VII as a thing. I really like Final Fantasy VII. Not to the point where I like it less the more I play it. But it never goes, like, below, like, top 4, top 5 for me. So it's like... It's always going to have a place. Regardless of what they'll do with it, regardless of what Final Fantasy VII Remake or Crisis Core or whatever the fuck may or may do. I mean, this game is always going to be special. Because, I've said this before, my mom showed up one day near 1998. I'm like 12 or 13 years old. She says, hey, the PlayStation's out and I'm thinking of getting it, so what game would you like? And I heard Kingsfield, which I've heard was from the From Software guys, or Final Fantasy VII. So I played 4, and I played 6. I played 6 at the Tower of Fanatics, of all places, so imagine that freaking place is the only introduction to Final Fantasy VI to that point. I had never seen the opera scene or nothing, but, like, I knew what Final Fantasy was, and I enjoyed it. But even, 25, 26 years after the fact, I'm like, okay. This still, it's really goofy, really broken in spots, really kind of silly, but it still has its moments. It still has its place. And I think a lot of it, as I said before, when we talked about what drives us to play video games, I like characters. I like stories about characters, because there's only so many stories you can talk about. But what happens to said characters? What happens? Well, this game starts with a fucking... Oh, you're telling me these people blow up a fucking factory full of people in it to save the planet? A bad environmental, unfriendly, capitalistic society? I mean, that's pretty fucking intense. And I always felt that this game was like the first mature Final Fantasy game. I mean, 6 has its moments, 4 does too, but I mean, and I'm not talking Barrett and Sid, cursing all the time. That's a part of it. But we saw all of the blood in, Midgar. We saw all the Wall Market stuff. But it's just crazy how, like, Disc 1, and I'm specifically talking Disc 1, I'm not talking Disc 2, because I have I like it, but I also kind of don't. But even then, I'm still like, the story's really freaking good. I mean, I'm enjoying all of this. Let's see, Halves, Fire, and I think for me, going back to it... Oh, I'll leave. Oh man, I should have not jumped. Anyway. W machine gun, nice. Yeah, shit. God damn it. I think for me, the biggest thing is not only the fact that the characters are so well, because you have characters in other games, like Metal Gear, Castlevania, whatever. Everybody has a different thing that they like. And for me, JRPGs have always been, as a long story, stuff happens to these characters. Sometimes it's really fucking weird. Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX. Final Fantasy VII is kind of on the, it's goofy, but not too goofy kind of side.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, because Cloud as a character has all this shit happening to him. And it's like, I want to see what happens to him. I want to see what happens to Aerith. I love I love the little things of all these little I know it sounds like I'm straining for ideas. I'm trying to do this off the cuff. I the love triangle with Aerith, Tifa, and Cloud. Like, this was the first time I had a love triangle, because I wasn't an anime fan at the time. I didn't know what harems were. I didn't do any of that crap, and I wasn't really into soap operas and things. So little stuff like this was so new. And even going back and playing it, you're like, what if this is the first time you've ever seen this kind of game? What does it say? And I've always been a fan of this kind of setting because it's very familiar. I'm not a huge fan of the medieval fantasy because it's just very boring. Knights and witches and mages and whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of like...
I'm kind of with you on that. I'm not really a big fan of medieval stuff either.
And you know, I'm kind of like, I don't want it to be super futuristic like Xenosaga most of the time. I don't mind stuff like super futuristic, but I'm also like, I don't need that all the time either. This is familiar. And that's something that I think the mid-era Final Fantasy... That's a lot of fucking birds. Something that the mid-year Final Fantasies, the 1990s Final Fantasies did. I know 10 focused more on the... It was still kind of fantasy-esque setting, but I mean, that Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, for all the issues I might have had with Final Fantasy VIII, it was still a very modernistic setting. It still had trappings, like, we're on buses, we're on trains, we're on things, but it's still, like, familiar but different. It's things that you can see in your real life but are still kind of strange. And I don't think you get that with medieval fantasy, because you kind of have to live in, oh, this is just a movie of a Final Fantasy, like, this is a Final Fantasy video game, it's a medieval fantasy, okay, I've seen King Arthur, I know that, I don't need to play a game of that. So that's why stuff like Final Fantasy 1 through 5 didn't really grab me. Final Fantasy 6 had kind of steampunk aesthetic, so, and everybody's different, I think. But again, it's also... A lot of games focus on the anime side of things and focus on, you know, it feels like an anime, plays like an anime, does anime stuff. Final Fantasy's never really done that. Like, they do to a degree, but they don't. Like, contrast that to Persona. It is all anime. It's for better or for worse.
Very true.
And... you know, not everybody's going to ascribe to that look. They're not gonna... What the fuck is this Japanese anime stuff? I don't get it. I don't want to get it. Like, Charred Monk. Charred Monk kind of feels that same way. Like, he said, like, Charred Monk's a streamer, you know. Somebody showed him Star Ocean. Somebody showed him, not Persona, but Xenosaga. And it was anime. It was Xenosaga, if you've never played it, is basically Evangelion if it was a Xeno game. With 2-hour cutscenes and anime cutscenes. I like that sort of thing. I still do. I wish they would fucking release a PS4 version of it, but Namco's cheap. But again, not everybody's going to aspire to that. Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, they're anime-fied to a degree. Specifically Dragon Quest, because it's like DBZ-looking game, for sure, but Final Fantasy's always focused on D&D as its inspiration, so the Western-style game, so it always feels somewhat familiar. So even though it's a Japanese RPG, it still has a familiarity to me as a player because I know these guys aren't Japanese in nature. They don't live in Japan. They don't live by Japanese conventions. They live by American or European or whatever the fuck kind of standards. So I'm not completely lost at it, and I think some people prefer that. Again, everybody's from a different country. If you're from Japan, I would imagine something that's Japanese-centric like Yakuza or Persona would easily, get you. But this has always kind of been the universal franchise. I'm not saying that's the reason it's always been the most popular one. I have no idea. This had a massive marketing budget behind it, and it had explosions. It had a dude with a gun on his arm that sounded like Mr. T. Like, I don't fucking know. Whatever worked. Final Fantasy VII was always kind of that gold standard. It's not my favorite Final Fantasy, but I'm not gonna dispute it. And even now, I'm like, this is gorgeous for the time. Hey! What do we do? No. Times are tough. I'm taking the treasure.
What?
Hey, baby! Uh-oh, we're fighting a mom. Uh-oh. I do hate the context of, oh god, we're killing a mother. Oh, that's terrible. We're killing a chicken to get Phoenix Downs. That's really mean. But anyway, what I always went for, I think what grabbed me was the world tour of this first disc, because we're in Corel, but we went from Midgar for like 4 or 5 hours. Now we're going to Costa del Sol. We've been to Junon, a very militaristic city. We've been almost flying off a fucking train track. But now we're climbing mountains. We're going to go through trees. We're going to go through forests. It's all these kinds of like crazy locales. And we're learning about the world. I think the issues I had with, say, Final Fantasy 8 and 9 was they were very slow. Almost to a snail's pace. And I know that's not always the case, but it always felt like they weren't showing off as much as Final Fantasy VII ever did. Because Final Fantasy VII shows you almost everything in-game in this first disc. And there's still some locations that they're keeping secret, but they're showing you, oh, you've been in Midgar, you've been in this place, you've been in this place, so go and find it, go learn a thing. And at the same time, we're going to learn about Barrett, we're going to learn about Zack, we're going to learn about Red 13. All of these people have different things that they're doing, so we're going to these places to look for Sephiroth as our main goal, but we're still doing it to learn about these characters. Because once we're done with Corel, we're going to know way more about Barrett than we ever did. So I always felt that the pacing of this game was good too. Ah, shit. I don't want to do that. I almost did it dumb. But I mean, you can see what I'm getting at in the sense that if this game was just about finding Sephiroth, I don't think it would be as good as it is. I need the characters to want to do something, but also show me something. That's why somebody like, I don't know, Kate Sith, we'll get to him in a minute, right? He has his reasons, but they don't focus on him enough for him to be a big enough attraction to me as a character. And he's a side character, I get that. But you contrast that to somebody like Sid. His sequences are amazing. Barrett's stuff is amazing. Tifa's stuff, almost everybody gets a thing to themselves. A lot of people talk about the scenes in Cosmo Canyon. anybody can kind of point to like one sequence in this world tour and say, oh my god, I remember being there when this thing happened. Because I was 10, 15, 20. Some people are playing this for the first time. They might be watching this on my channel for the first time. I have no idea.
The reason why, and we're totally mispronouncing this, and I'm aware of it. Kate Sith, the reason why he's not such a dynamic character.
Yeah, Kaichi, sorry.
It's Ketchi.
Yep.
But the reason why I think he's not such a dynamic character is because they don't really... They explain who he is, but they don't really give him a story arc.
No.
And that's the only reason why so many people don't like him, is because he doesn't get a story arc where you feel invested in him.
Yeah.
And they also cheapen it. Like, at one point, he puts himself in a very dangerous situation for the sake of the party, but they trivialize it by bringing him, you know, by basically negating it right afterwards.
Yeah, and it's like, what's the point?
Like, yeah, there was like, you got emotionally invested in him for just a few seconds, and then they just completely pulled the rug out from under you and trivialized it. So it was like a big fake out. But they even give Yuffie and Vincent their own little story arcs in here, even though they're characters that they thought they were going to have to cut out and then they got to put back in at the last minute. They have story arcs.
Yeah. And to be fair, I'm not saying that this party is better than Final Fantasy 4s or 5s or 6s or 7s. Or I personally think Final Fantasy 10 have an unfair advantage because they're always around. They're almost... Outside of Riku, they're almost all together, like, right at the beginning of the game. So, they kind of have an unfair advantage. But they also have voice acting to balance that stuff out. But even then, it's like, I know everything about Cloud or Barret or Tifa, and I want to re-experience a game. And that's something that... When you have a game that speaks to you, you have something that you have an attachment for. You either have an attachment for the battle system, you have an attachment for the visuals, you have an attachment for the characters. I have an attachment for the characters and the visual style. I'm not saying the graphics, because look at these. These graphics are, you know, very, very dated even by PS1 standards. But they still kind of represent... Ooh, look at the level 2. They represent... I was 13 years old. I was playing this with my brother. I was doing this for months. This is something that I remember doing and learning about and trying and then replaying it and beating it in like 2 or 3 weeks and being like, I want to play this over and over and over again, you know, that sort of thing. I get that with some, say, Persona games or a Dragon Quest game or Yakuza. I think Yakuza or like Doki Doki or whatever, you know, something like that, where I'm so wholly invested in that thing that now it's like, oh god, I believe in this now. But it's not always that easy to find something that I just remember so wholly. And even though I'm not going to say this is my favorite Final Fantasy game, it still has something that the other games don't. It has that crazy nostalgia factor. I distinctly remember, what was it? There was a convention about 15 years ago. People were asking, like a poll in the crowd, raise your hand if you've played or started with X Final Fantasy game, right? And by and large, oh, Cloud's dead. Okay. By and large, it was like 60% of the audience raised their hand because it was this game. It's a crazy feeling. It's a crazy idea to think that this is what people started with. Some people started with 1. I started with 4. And 6.
Well, I've already told you this is the first one I started with, too.
Yeah, and there is that somebody will enjoy it because it was their first game, right? in a series. Like, I still think Dragon Quest VIII is my favorite, even though I'd say like 5 or 11 are technically better games because that was the first one I played. Like, I have a fondness for Zelda 1, even, or not Zelda 1, but Zelda Link to the Past, because that was the one I played, and now it's the randomizers, but still, it's like that was the one I remember, so that's the one I go to.
I mean,
Mario 3, Super Mario World, like,
like the first Resident Evil I ever played was the demo for Resident Evil 3.
Yeah. So,
and then I went back, and I liked Resident Evil 3 so much, I ended up going back and playing the first and the second one.
Yeah. So everybody starts in a different way, and I think that's another thing, is like, as long as somebody has an attachment to a game for a reason, it's not right to say one reason is wrong or one reason is right. They enjoy the game for a reason. And I've said characters and story are my reason. Some people like this game for the materia system. It's not my favorite system. It's basically Final Fantasy VI all over again. Better a little bit. But, you know, but again, we'll get into that when we podcast about it, but still, this game still is going to hold a special place, regardless of if better games come along, and they have. But I'm still going to value it super well, and one of the reasons why is these next few cutscenes with Barret. Hey, he's back! But yeah, I just wanted to do that because we were climbing that fucking mountain. It was a big old waste of time. Anyway, we're here. Yay, we spent 20 minutes climbing a mountain. Oh! Ouch. Well, looky here. Never thought I'd see your face again. Those people over there, they with you? Well, I feel sorry for them. Hanging around a walking death sentence like Barret. You got a lot of nerve coming back here. Look at this place! It's all your fault North Corel turned into a garbage heap. Why don't you say something? Or did you forget what you've done already? I'm sorry. Fucking hell, you ain't worth the effort. Don't waste your time talking to that techno freak. Man.
Ouch, man.
You heard him. It's my fault this town was destroyed. Well, fuck. That sounds like it's a doozy of a problem. A problem we'll feel next episode. Yay. Come on. Turn off